Hi everyone, and welcome to the virtual edition of our year-round screening series, Film Independent Presents. I'm Rachel Bleemer, Director of Events for Film Independent. Before we get started for today, I have to give some praise to our supporters. Thank you to our incredible lead sponsor, the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, our screening partner, Vision Media, and our media partner, the Los Angeles Times. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for today. Please welcome Katie Rife.
Hi.
Oh, that's it. You're on now.
Oh, all right.
Sure. Well, okay, so since we're here, we're doing all this stuff online. I'm sure you've been doing a lot of Q&As online, things like that. How online were all of you before you started work on this film? Because I think this film kind of demonstrates a type of person who we would call extremely online.
I was not online at all. I think Giorgio is kind of Giorgio and Caryn, I think, are a little bit more online than Aaron and I. But yeah, all the stuff like Unfortunate and everything had to be approached as a research project, you know?
Yeah, I barely had a MySpace account.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never did. I never really got too deep into 4chan, but the general social media, but yeah, never got real deep.
Yeah.
Giorgio keeps things spicy on Twitter.
Yes. Yeah.
So then so how did you get to a subject of something that is sort of emblematic of this, this online culture and I think this is a really interesting case study that you picked to discuss this phenomenon of this sort of like war of the normies versus the online that's going on, because it does trace through all the different eras. How did you first become aware of it, and were you interested in it as emblematic or just as a story in itself?
We first became aware of it through Matt Furie's comics. So it is a movie about folks who are extremely online, but I came to it through a Xerox zine, bought at, I think, probably Quimby's Books in Chicago. So it was something that, came out of love of Matt Furie's original comics and his artwork. And then when I started to see Pepe pop up, both in the mainstream media and then also online in 2015, where he was getting retweeted by, then presidential candidate Donald Trump, there was this moment where this comic book that I loved had suddenly passed off the page and into the sort of vortex of the internet. And I found it to be very confusing. And so, but I like that you said case study. That's a way that I think all of us talked about the film when we were in the trenches working on it, because we understood that while it could be an artist story, it could also be a very unique case study in the way that trolling moved off of message boards and into mainstream politics in the 2016 election.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I was aware of Pepe just having spent a lot of time on Reddit and stuff as a meme, and I was embarrassed when Arthur told me about this project he was working on that I didn't know anything about Matt's background. But like, in terms of like stories to find, I think, to me, my favorite films are the ones that are about something very specific, but really talk about a much broader cultural moment. And like, Pepe is this uniquely insane story about something on its face kind of absurd and silly, but actually, like, the more you dig into it, you really understand that it speaks to a much bigger, maybe more complicated story that is otherwise hard to comprehend. But for the virtue of this silly frog, we're able to tell his story, and through that, like, hopefully give people some, at least peace of mind or something. I don't know.
And just timing wise, it came at such a time where it felt like so many people in the online world and in the real world were confused by what was happening on this online world and how we got where we are right now. And so it became the story that really simplified and explained it in a very simple way to kind of help us through these last 4 years and this past election too, I think.
Yeah. Well, we jumped right into it, but while we're talking, I just want to go ahead and introduce everybody. In the middle of the interview, we're mixing it up a little bit. Down here on the bottom left, we've got Arthur Jones, who's the director of the film. And then in center left here, we've got Giorgio Angelini, who's a producer on the film. And you also share a director credit, correct?
This is a film by Arthur and I.
Yeah.
I shot some of it and then wrote the final song, credit song. Yeah.
That's great. I want to hear more about that later.
Oh, right on.
And then top left, we've got producer Aaron Wickenden. And then, hello. And then in the and then in the center right below my face, we've got Caryn Capotosto, who's also a producer on the film. And we're here talking about Feels Good Man. So let's backtrack just a little bit. I thought that was interesting what you said, Arthur, about the comics, because that's how I heard of Pepe too. I bought a boys club at Quimby's.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
I have the comic that is the panel where he says "Feel Good."
Number
Feel
2,
good.
issue number 2, yeah.
Yeah, the one.
Well,
that
number 1, really, if we're being honest. Sorry.
Yes, he's doing number 1 in issue number 2. But we're going to try to keep it PG from here on out.
Did being a fan of his actual work and not just coming at it as a meme, did that help kind of sell Matt Furie on doing the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I'd become friends with Matt Furie in 2013. We met through some mutual friends, and my background is animation and, cartooning. So I'd been a fan of his stuff. And then while we were setting out to make Feels Good Man, I always thought that I was excited to tell a story about kind of how cartoons are important. And I also kind of knew that since I could do a lot of the animation in the film, it would maybe be just a really resourceful way to make this scrappy, interesting film. And I also want to say it's a very exciting thing to, be here sort of in the same room with Aaron and Giorgio and Caryn, because to get this thing made, we all had to wear multiple hats. Aaron was the lead editor. He was the producer. Giorgio shot a lot of it, produced. Caryn was out there beating the drum for Feels Good Man from the very beginning. And so it's been a really collaborative thing thus far. So yeah, I mean, Matt, I presented the idea of making a documentary to Matt and Ayana, his partner, who's also an amazing artist and is featured in the film. And I tried to be as transparent with them as possible, just being like, this is about how long it's going to take. These are the people I hope to sort of be collaborating with, and they really trusted me in a way that, thinking back now, I'm very kind of surprised and thankful that they did, obviously, because, as I was learning how to be a director of a documentary, Matt was learning how to be a subject of a documentary. And I'm kind of glad we got to go through it together.
Yeah. So let's talk about the animation and the songs in the film. I think that that's one thing that really helps to, it adds a little something to the film. And being a film about an artist, one would hope that art would be part of the thing. And it helps remind you, I think, that there is still joy in art, even if it can be used for these twisted ends, right? So how, you said you were learning how to make a documentary, Arthur. So I suppose you were kind of learning as you went along. I was wondering how, does introducing an animated element, does it change the way that you assemble it, or is it, pretty standard?
Yeah, well, I want to throw this question to Aaron, because as an editor, I think you had to sort of deal with the sort of back and forth with that.
Yeah, I mean, so, the extent to which the original sort of the way the film gets layered is, we had a number of the primary interviews filmed from the beginning when I started working on it. We had the primary interview with Matt and Ayana, Johnny Ryan, Chris Sullivan, a couple others. And, I would cut a scene almost like it would have a radio edit kind of feeling to it and a rhythm, with an understanding that Arthur would be able to take it and spin it, along with ultimately our team of great animators we worked with, in any kind of different direction. And so that was kind of both liberating, and also, having never worked in that way, it opens up this endless possibilities. And so for me though, we were cutting it in Premiere, and I would just, Google, Pepe, Christmas, or Pepe, whatever, all kinds of horrible things as well. And then, you would find some pretty basic JPEGs and things like that, pull them into Premiere, lay them in. And then most of the time I was doing just the crudest sort of zoom in, repositions, all this kind of stuff where, you know, the image would even be off the side and there'd be a black bar. I mean, really basic work. And then Arthur would kind of take it and spin that into another layer. Like, I think one of the first things that we actually collaborated on was this sequence where Pepe pulls his pants down to pee, and Arthur came out to Chicago so we could do that, like, very, very crucial sequence. But it was cool because Arthur was set up in the other room on like a, you know, just a table in the other room, and I would kind of cut it for the audio and then hand it to Arthur, and then Arthur would kind of do his magic and create this like just incredible symphony of imagery. What I've always loved about Arthur is like he has a real ability to communicate visually, like the incredible amounts of story detail very quickly. I mean, maybe, I don't know if that's something like he could elaborate on, but I think that's one of his gifts as an animator, especially. And one of the things for me as an editor that was really exciting in terms of our collaboration.
I will elaborate and say that the sound of when Pepe pees and goes, ah, that's the sound of Aaron. So I will elaborate on what Aaron said.
Uncredited. I mean, well, now credited here for Film Independent. This is like,
we couldn't afford your union rate, buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, I'll brag about Aaron too, in that he's just extremely good at figuring out how we were going to be able to use the animation really intentionally to drive the story and to be a really specific layer of the story. And he's just a real expert at that and did a great job.
For sure.
Thanks,
and I think working with 3 established filmmakers definitely gave me like a sense of confidence in going into this project, because I knew that I could just kind of like lean on their particular expertise. And so the moments that I maybe felt kind of like ill-equipped to do something, I knew that I always had like that I was standing on the shoulders of giants. So it was a really nice experience in that regard.
But there was the rationale for animation was multifaceted, right? Like we understood from the beginning that the story was going to be a very compelling story, but it also lent itself to a creative problem to solve that we thought would be really useful and exciting to explore. And like probably one of the most exciting things to really, the nut to crack, was really to figure out how the animation would weave into the film without taking away from the A story. And like initially we really had conceived of actually a much longer animated sequence that would have like a script and have its own sub narrative. And I think we learned very early on that was only so much you could cram into a film, and that actually like the most important thing that the animations could do was elevate the emotionality of the film, because we kind of also knew that the ending, we really wanted to end with Pepe, and we wanted it to feel like you were losing a buddy, right? And like really get back to the core of what like good animation I think is. And so it was a great like collaboration in that sense, because there was a lot of trial and error to get there.
Yeah, we wanted, and Aaron's discipline definitely was like a big part in figuring that out. But we really wanted to make sure that after you've seen Feels Good Man, we gave Matt Furie's artwork the stage presence that it deserved. And so that you would really have a sense of, even if you've seen Pepe as a meme on the internet, that you will be like, oh, okay, I understand Pepe's backstory. I understand that he came from this very specific imaginative world made by someone. And we felt like that was always the thing that Pepe needed. There's been a lot of cartoon characters that have been turned into memes over the years, but those are cartoon characters that have a bigger presence within pop culture and maybe like, you know, a huge corporate IP behind them to protect their copyright. And Pepe's never had that because it was made by this kind of like scrappy artist who we see working in a thrift store. Like he didn't have a lawyer on retainer to fight the people on Reddit who were using it. And so we just wanted the animations to feel like they were beautiful and artistic, and they had like a real importance that we were giving them within the film.
That's really interesting what you said about Matt Furie not having, you know, lawyers or corporate IP behind him. Do you think this film could function as sort of I hope not. I don't think it's discouraging. I think it's actually very encouraging to artists, but like a sort of a cautionary tale to artists about, maybe file some paperwork with your character.
Well, no, I'll let someone else in the team take that one.
He had a copyright. It was just about enforcement, right? Like, and in the beginning, like all of us experiencing the internet, it was fun and interesting, and Pepe was really just this reaction in an image, and I think he was kind of flattered that it was reaching so many different people in this funny way. And then it wasn't really until things started to turn for the dark that he started to feel like the anxiety of it all and how he could deal with it. But like, he's just a single artist, right? And there's no large company out there pumping the brand of Pepe out there. And so it really took this catalyzing moment that had to get so dark that he basically was able to get really talented lawyers to come on board and help him for free so that he could actually fight his copyright, because having the copyright alone isn't enough, right? Like he can't spend all day long. And also it's a weird fight, right? Because so much of it is happening in these diffuse, hard to understand ways, like people on Twitter just making tweets or creating avatars. Like you can't one by one just like be like, hey, could you please maybe not use my artwork? So it was only until like the more opportunistic grifters like Alex Jones and Richard Spencer actually started using Pepe specifically to either generate revenue or as like their own logo that he could finally like take concise action.
Mm-hmm.
And actually just realizing how dangerous that it could actually become once we have Trump in the White House.
Right.
And then people were like, what just happened?
Thinking about the difficulty also, the one-on-one challenge reminds me of, just even our challenge of keeping the film from being pirated, which I think Giorgio might be able to speak to really well. At one point, I think we were the second highest pirated film next to Mulan. Is that right?
Yeah.
So Giorgio has been great at trying to kind of, talk to people one-on-one, but, in terms of enforcement, like you were saying, it's difficult,
it's
right?
a full-time job.
Yeah, it is. If you flag something on YouTube, it doesn't come down. It's more effective to write the person who posted it. So.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely came into our minds as we were thinking about how to distribute the film, being such a viral character, we were kind of wondering, just putting it up online, would the film have the same sort of virality as Pepe himself? And, of course, that's still something that we're in the middle of. So.
Well, here's another question for the folks that were more, doing the production side. Maybe for you, Giorgio. Do you agree that spending a lot of time in, one could say, the darker corners of the internet is not good for your mental health?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Mills, our 4chan guy, is a good example of that. I mean, Arthur and I spent a week with him in his basement lair. And I mean, I think Mills would be the first person to tell you that he knows it's unhealthy for him. I mean, there's a culture on 4chan of people who are like, okay, I'm see you later, guys. Like, I'm finally swearing off of this thing. It's ruining my life. I know it's bad for me and I need to just like cut cold turkey. And then they come back weeks later. I mean, it does have a striking resemblance to other kind of addictions, right? There's a kind of spiraling that happens where you're amongst people who are just kind of always trying to what we call like irony poison each other. And there's kind of only it's hard to get out of that, right? And you would see this shift in Mills's personality just literally from moving throughout his house. He would be upstairs in the kitchen with his mom, who's as sweet as can be, sort of Midwestern mom, making lunch for the family, and his brother, who's like a hunky YouTube hunter guy, and like they're having a nice family moment, and then he descends down into the basement and he's just like, he gets locked in. And no, I mean, I think for sure there's a kind of sinister quality to the way that websites, not just like 4chan, but honestly any social media, are built to sort of tease out of you your kind of worst, most cynical ways. And I think the film, if anything, is really just a reminder to people to say, like, like a reconfirmation of humanity, and to say that there's another way to work. You can reject that cynicism, and you shouldn't feel ashamed to be empathetic and authentic.
Yeah, I mean, even the thing you said about people threatening to quit and then coming back, that happens even on Twitter all the time.
All the
constantly,
time.
Right?
Yeah, with me. I done it myself. Yeah. Yes.
Well, and also it's interesting, you know, how quickly this sort of culture moves, you know, to even tracing the story, you trace, you know, Pepe's evolution from sort of I call him a sweet stoner frog in my review, to a hate symbol, and then dead and back again in this documentary. That was 10 years. But even over the course of the year that you made this thing, when it debuted at Sundance, so much has changed just in the year. Like, how are you feeling about this culture that you're documenting? It is very tied to Donald Trump. As we move forward with Biden and Harris, what do you think is going to, where do you think that's going to go next? Do you have any ideas?
Well, I mean, certainly there are some parallels between the 2016 moment that we documented in Feels Good Man and what happened in 2020. The most obvious one is, you know, in the same way that Pepe started as a joke on 4chan and then sort of like bled out into the mainstream politics, you know, we had QAnon sort of starting on 4chan initially as a joke, and then all of a sudden became a bigger and bigger conspiracy theory, and became part of a mainstream politics where there's a couple different sort of QAnon adherents who were elected into office. So, you know, the story of trolling and misinformation coming off of these message boards and into politics continues to be something that is extremely relevant and only growing in power. And the way that this sort of attention economy that these things operate within allow the most extreme loud voices within those communities to just kind of control the discourse is something that, you know, is something we're all contending with in a way that is scary. Like, can social media help democracy, or is it going to only tear it apart? Like, I mean, this is the subtext of Feels Good Man. I mean, you know, this is an artist story, but in the same way that Pepe sort of got snatched from Matt, you know, we can all recognize the Pepes in our lives that feel like they've been snatched from us. Like, you know, in some ways we feel as consensus reality has been taken from us in some of these moments. And so that's why we've always thought about it, like you said before, like a case study, you know. This is an interesting way of exploring this like problem that often seems incomprehensible, but the story of Pepe is a comprehensible way of talking about it.
A little silver lining and hope at the end of the tunnel for all of us and for Pepe was the surprise that happened actually to us while making the film and cutting the end of the film. We had no idea that the Hong Kong would happen, and that, you know, in the middle of trying to figure out what our ending was going to be, mostly thinking about it around Matt's lawsuit with Alex Jones, figuring out how we were going to end the film and land the plane, then Hong Kong happened, which was a silver lining for Pepe and a new beginning in a way, and a good ending for us. So maybe the same thing will repeat another happy cycle.
Oh, Katie, you're muted.
Katie, you're muted.
I'm unmuted, thank you. Oh, well, you know, we're talking about all this, and something that I'm wondering is, so this story, like, you know, we talk about a case study and multi-layered and all these different things that, like, in the subtext, were you like, how did you sort of navigate balancing on the one, this kind of like sweet biographical documentary with two, you know, a political story, and then three, you have this deep, very deep philosophical underbase about the mutability of reality. Like, how did you tease out those threads and kind of balance them in the film?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. So, I mean, in terms of the structure of the film, you know, from the beginning, we always knew we were going to be using this as a case study, following, you know, Matt and his, as, you know, our primary character. we didn't know how close to Matt's story or how far away we could go. So we started putting the film together and kind of, made some discoveries in the edit. I think we found that, like, in the film, you could only drift so far from Matt and Matt's story and how these sort of mutations of Pepe and what was happening to him over time. There's only so far you could drift from that before you would start to kind of lose the thread of what the film was. So the way we built out the movie was to have these very, like, discrete, mutations of the character, where Pepe went from sort of being Matt's to, being someone else's. And we talked about it like as if someone was sort of putting Pepe on like a puppet and then making him do something else. And then how did that impact Matt? And then the character would mutate again. And so, that is generally like the underlying structure of the film, that sort of cause and effect relationship. And that's what sort of animates the energy of the story.
And then artistically, we just tried to do things that to emphasize that cause and effect. And there were things that we utilized to do that. One was music. One was like the music in the sections with Matt have a different sort of like instrumentation and feeling to it than the way the music functions in the more digital space. We have like a little bit more quiet. There's a little bit more breathing room in those sections. If we're going to utilize animation in those situations, we're going to try to make it feel very different than the motion graphics that we might have used when we're talking about the sort of energy of the internet. And so using this sort of like analog versus digital kind of approach made a very complicated film very like modular, and it felt like something that we could tackle without sort of like losing the thread. It was a real gift as we were figuring it out to have Matt and Pepe as this sort of like anchor to the movie.
I still feel so bad for his friend who got the tattoo.
Don't feel bad for Chris. Don't feel bad for Chris for a second. Don't do it.
He's a fun loving dude.
Chris is doing great.
Chris is doing great.
Chris is always doing great.
But
I was just gonna say, when we premiered the film at Sundance, they allow you to go kind of to these different photo sessions and stuff like that. And there was one that was like a Pizza Hut sponsored photo session, and Chris got more swag than anybody around. He had the hat, he had the sweater, the scarf. So he was like fully decked out in Pizza Hut gear for the entire stay in Park City.
Yeah, it was great. Actually, at the premiere, he was sitting right in the middle of the audience. And he's a tall guy, and he has like the hair and everything. And it was great to he loved the film. He was clapping, he was standing up. It was a huge relief, I think, to us as filmmakers to see that the subjects were having such a good time watching it.
Yeah, it's really hard not to love these guys. They come across so lovable. And even the sort of like the 4chan characters and the guy who buys the Pepe Bitcoin and all this stuff. Aside from the obvious villains like Alex Jones, were you trying not to demonize these people too much?
I think that was really. I was certainly with Mills. I don't know. We were more.
I don't think it's a documentary. I don't think it's a documentarian's job to demonize people.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were interested in exploring the systems that would allow someone to become indoctrinated. Like, what is it happening on a societal level that would put someone in the basement for this many hours on end? And we tried to play it as we're trying to let people tell their own stories and just let people make their own minds up. I think from the very beginning, we wanted to make sure that this film didn't feel like scoldy, that it could be something that, like, maybe it's naive, but I think it's borne out to be the case that, like, it could be a movie that everyone could watch and really like think about fairly, and not rather than a film that would like make people defensive and feel like they're being attacked or something like that. And so that was like a very conscious effort, I think, on our part. But for Alex Jones, it's just like, you know, and we just let him tell his own story too. He does it just as no one does a better job of making Alex Jones the villain than Alex Jones himself. So
I just wanted to add, like, you know, and maybe be like useful to know this for this particular audience. Like, editorially, it was challenging at the beginning and with early edits to land the right balance with how Matt was presented in the film, because, you know, he can seem or come across as a passive character, you know, not making, you know, active choices, and in that way being kind of unattached to kind of the story we were trying to tell. And I think one of the ways we knew that the film had kind of found its balance is people were able to understand him well enough and understand who he was, you know, his soul a bit, and relate to why he wouldn't, like, understand why he wouldn't respond at first. And I think that was our challenge as filmmakers, was to frame that in the right way so that you understood and related to that. Like, you know, yeah, he wasn't a person who was on 4chan, so why would he be responding right away? But it took a while to find that balance, and you know, it's a challenge for filmmakers to present your character in a way that where their actions, you know, are framed correctly and honestly.
yeah, I mean, Arthur often says, like, the film is an emotional journey of Pepe and people's emotional relationship to Pepe. So I think the truth behind the way we rendered each character, hopefully, is showing their emotions, like how they relate to the story. And I think, you know, people can come away with whatever opinions they want about the people, but I think, you know, the emotional truth, we hope, was rendered in each character.
And we also had these amazing gifts, like, you know, it's a documentary film about social media and the internet, but within it we have a death. It's a death of a sad, silly frog that we handle in a way that in some ways seems very sincere, but in other ways there's like a layer of, you know, winking in that section. Or the section with Alex Jones, we approach that as like, all right, this is our shootout moment, or this is our fist fight. This is the moment of conflict. And, you know, I think this was a really unique film, and where as filmmakers we could sort of see, like, how do we take this story and figure out a way to turn it into like a very compelling movie that operated as like a very satisfying narrative arc. And because we had Pepe, this malleable, wonderful, funny, hilarious character at the center of it, it gave us a lot of chances for us as artists to sort of see ourselves within this story and bring it to life in a way that we felt was like going to be satisfying for hopefully everybody.
Yeah, I think to also try and expand it beyond the universe of people who already knew and either loved or hated Pepe, but then to also engage a broader audience of people who wouldn't normally perhaps pick up the comic book or look at or be into memes or the silly frog or animation or anything, but to understand, to broaden the understanding that this was a bigger story about the world we live in and the internet world we live in, and to get other people interested who may not initially click on a movie like this. So
yeah, like I showed the film to my parents, who were, you know, in their late 60s, early 70s, and they had no idea of any of the stuff, and it really helped them understand, like, why the world is the way it is right now.
I will say though that Aaron's mom helped us find the cryptocurrency guys.
That's right.
That her Google sleuthing brought us Pepe Cash Millionaire. So,
Oh wow!
So this was a team effort.
Well, on that same note, we're going to take a few audience questions, and there's one
Alright.
that I think leads into this one very nicely. Riley asks, 4chan, being as anonymous as it is difficult to put a face to. You included a real 4chan user as an interview subject who played a fairly big role in the documentary. Can you talk about the process of finding the subject and why it was important to include him? Thank you.
We felt like it was important to include someone who had used Pepe and had cared about Pepe, and felt like we knew that someone like Mills would be able to sort of like demystify a part of the story that a lot of people were very confused by. They were like, why, how could people be so upset by this cartoon frog? And then what was the sort of like machinations behind the scenes that kind of weaponized Pepe? And so from the very beginning, my hope was to not focus on the provocateurs of the movement, like Richard Spencer, which has been appeared in a number of other documentary films. But we wanted to focus on the people that Richard Spencer or his ilk would seek to exploit. This was the audience of disaffected guys who are unhappy with their conditions and were susceptible to the sort of brotherhood of white supremacy or something like this, or they were susceptible to the trolling aesthetics of it. And so that's why we felt like it was important. Mills, though, is someone, if you are on 4chan for a period of time, you'll see photos of Mills. Mills is a meme within 4chan. He himself is a meme. And so the person who questioned is correct. It's mostly an anonymous platform, but Mills's face is on it. So he became sort of a de facto 4chaner. And, you know, there was this one video that I stumbled upon when I was like searching through YouTube archives that was just labeled with a date, and it only had a handful of views. And it was the video in which Mills is holding up his phone, and it's before he's about to go to bed. And he says, "What does Pepe mean to me?" And I was watching it in my studio at night. Everyone was asleep in the house. And I felt like Mills was talking to me. And there was this moment where I was like, he's going to be in the movie. He's going to be in the movie. And so that was, I don't know, that's the way it happened. And I know that it's probably uncomfortable for some people to see it, but Mills is representative of a lot of people who are in this country right now who feel lost, who feel like they don't know how to access the part of America that they've always believed they were entitled to. They don't know how to like access the part of America that's going to give them a good job or get them a house or get them out of the basement. And part of that anger creates like this reactionary force in the United States, and they're part of this coalition that's happening because they feel like they're on the outside looking in. And we wanted people to understand the emotion of it, because Pepe became the avatar for grievance and anger in America during this brief moment in 2016. And it's because there are a lot of people who feel angry, and the internet knows how to amplify anger in a way that has never been seen on a global scale before. The attention economy will amplify anger to like an irrational end. And so, you know, someone like Mills is very susceptible to this, you know, form of extreme and edgy communication. And so that's why he was important.
Yeah, and like the truth of that was what made Mills's character so difficult to tell, because the truth, like I was saying earlier, the truth of Mills's story that he wanted to tell was his emotions, right? Because that's his emotional truth. But what was less interesting was the aggrievement, the bullshit, right? Like the sense of entitlement or the sense that he's being wronged, right? Like those are not important, because those are manipulations of his emotional state, right? And we wanted to really interrogate like what happens in those emotional states and why these things are happening. So like it made him a very tricky character to edit, but one we all thought was like super important to include, because, you know, this is like the center of the issue that we're all kind of confronting now, is how we deal with this, like, unfortunately very vibrant, pulsating anger that's happening online. And like, you know, it's not going away. And it's not to say that we need to capitulate to it or to sympathize with it, but it is to understand it is vital.
Aaron, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, you know, on a storytelling level, there's also a really big difference when you're working on a film and someone is very close to an experience versus someone is sort of studying or analyzing an experience. And on the films I work on, you know, you try to kind of bring the audience in as closely as possible to sort of like proximity of experience. So with someone like Mills being able to say, like, you know, to speak in the I, like, I used Pepe to do this, you know, I observed this moment where he became the smug Pepe, and this is what that meant to me. it's so different than when you have somebody standing outside of that saying, you know, they did this, or I saw this happen. You know, it's sort of far from the experience. And I think the one thing we were conscious of with the film on a technical level was just trying to kind of like modulate those two things. So you had Dale, who was, you know, giving you, who has studied 4chan at length, you know, come throughout the film to give you that perspective. So to be able to modulate between the lived experience and a closely observed experience.
Well, let's get a couple more questions here. One here is a very technical, so I'll ask this one first. How did you get the Alex Jones deposition footage, if you can say, and whose permission, if any, did you need to include it? This sounds like a question from a documentarian or an aspiring one.
Through fair use. I mean, the lawyers provided it to us. There's basically like, it becomes public record unless you know, you file it otherwise, and Alex Jones didn't file it otherwise, so it just became part of like discovery essentially. So yeah. So
yeah, shout out to Katie El-Hamadidi, who is our fair use attorney.
Yeah.
She's the best. She's the best.
But it's incredible. I mean, I cannot tell you the joy of what, I mean, because they're like 3+ hours each, and like there is so much incredible stuff. They're like cutting, when we first saw the first cut of the back and forth between Matt and Alex, like there are like 6 different versions of that, and each one is equally hysterical for completely different reasons. It was really hard to decide how to choose, but like the emotional truth of that is basically like just showing that Matt just being cool as a cucumber, like going up against the final boss of sorts, and that like here's Alex Jones, who actually doesn't give an F about anything, any of it at all. Like he even though the deposition's happening in his own office, he showed up an hour late, you know, he wasn't prepared for it. Like that, all of this is farce, right? Like that's what was so awesome about the way Aaron and our other editors, Drew and Katrina, like treated that scene. Is that it is like looking in the mirror of the internet farce, right? It's like saying, here it is. All of this is meaningless. Don't take this asshole seriously. He literally doesn't care. He's just trying to sell you like bone broth supplements.
Okay, and then one more question that's for everybody. And this one's a little more lighthearted, but I think it is applicable because this movie left me feeling hopeful, like more hopeful than I expected in the first half. By the end, I was like, oh. Anyway, Rebecca asks, when you see Pepe now, what is your initial emotion?
Oh, I always thought Pepe was love from the very beginning, because I just felt like I really fell in love with the comic books, and then Matt as a character, and his family, and I always felt like so mad that the internet did this to Pepe, when I just, because I connected with the main character of our story so much.
Show her your tattoo, Caryn.
Well, we did do like, well, and now it's upside down. See, I should have got it the other way. No, wait, no, there we go. I got Pepe eyes. We did tattoos at Sundance. It was really fun.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's so funny. I brought it up like it was a problem and you all have them.
But, you know, because that's the thing I thought,
Yeah.
you know, well, we all really did, you know, just see the integrity of the character and the, you know, genuine reason why Matt created him and fell in love with him. And I do love that he gets that treatment at the end, that he is like, and I love that he's an omen for good and hopefulness at the end of our film. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll add, for me, you know, and Matt, I think Matt says this at the end of the movie, but you know, Pepe has changed. And the film, you know, even though it has this direct connection to the, you know, political environment that we're in, you know, it's also a meditation on an individual's like ability to navigate and deal with change on a personal level. And in that way, I find it also really beautiful and useful. And so Pepe, for me, is that opportunity to, you know, see things as mutable. I think Matt says, you know, Pepe won't always be this way or something like that. There won't always be humans on this planet. And they're just that ability to kind of like abstract out that far and think about that, you know, during this time with, you know, COVID and just so many extremes, it's helpful to think that all of this will be different. And, you know, we have a lot of life ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm really satisfied. I mean, I'm glad that the movie left you with a sense of hope, because I think that, you know, we wanted this film to have a sense of poetry to it. And, you know, there's been a lot of movies made about the internet, and then there's been a lot of sci-fi movies sort of where there's a dystopian instinct that takes over, like the algorithms, the machines have taken over and there's no going back. And we wanted very self-consciously for this movie not to sort of embrace that. And we wanted to realize like, this is a moment that we have willpower over, both as filmmakers and then hopefully in a larger capacity within society. And so, you know, Pepe leaving the film, leaving Matt, leaving the audience with this beautiful sunset was a artistic choice that we made, and Giorgio wrote the song at the end of it, and our animators did an amazing job bringing that to life. And that was something that was a gift for Matt and hopefully like a gift for the viewer. That's the way that we were hoping for it. And I've always loved Pepe. He's never been a hate symbol to me, but he is the symbol of an underdog, and I recognize that that's kind of like powerful. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have Pepe in my life. I have pictures of Pepe up in the house. You know, it's something that brings me a lot of joy, and this film has brought me a lot of joy, and the collaborations within it have brought me a lot of joy. So for me, Pepe is a gift.
I mean, it's insane, I would say, just to back up to this whole story in general, just to think that like a guy in his 20s making a Xerox cartoon ends up creating a character that is now probably in the top 10 most recognizable cartoon characters around the world. And he's never spent maybe like $600 to $700 like promoting the film. I mean, the cartoon and its life, like
Wow.
that there's a power to the cartoon itself, and that people see in it some kind of ennui or whatever it is. Like there's power to cartoons and there's powers to images, and like what happened in 2015, 2016 was really, I think, just like an aberration and a much longer story about like really this powerful, incredible piece of art that Matt created. He tapped into something. I don't know.
Clearly. And well, I just want to end by congratulating all of you on the film. I think it does a wonderful job of conveying the emotion that you all were talking about, and also really just wrapping up a very complicated issue in a very compelling narrative. So congratulations to all of you. And just one more time, we have with us Aaron.
Hey, thank you, Katie. Really appreciate it. And I see there's like 31 participants right now. So shout out to all the Film Independent.
And then Giorgio.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the questions.
Caryn.
Thank you.
And Arthur.
Yeah, thanks for the great questions, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching the movie. Thanks for, thanks for this pandemic hang.
It's all been a labor of love. We put this film out ourselves, and it's like really moving that we're here and that there's 30 participants. Thank you all for coming to join us.
We're losing them. We're losing them.
We're losing them.
Oh no.
Are there any other screenings of the film coming up if someone saw this and wanted to, tell their friends?
We're organizing them. Just check in on our social media. We built a website to be able to do really great live, try to make the virtual experience as in person as possible. So we're always looking for opportunities to have special screenings, and we're working actively with different organizations and individuals to host fun Q&As like this. So
and shout out to PBS, ITVS, who've been great partners. The BBC has been a great partner, and people can rent it. That would be nice. Perhaps consider renting it, or it's the holidays. You could buy a Blu-ray. Features amazing deleted scenes. So
all your friends who are bootlegging our movie to stop
Yeah, you can send us a Bitcoin donation that goes into the waterfall. Our EPs will be super happy. Shout out to Wavelength Productions, the wonderful Wavelength Productions, who
And the
made
soundtrack's
this
on
film
vinyl.
possible.
Oh yeah, the soundtrack. Beautiful.
On
Oh,
vinyl.
the soundtrack, the beautiful soundtrack by Ari Belusian and Brian Hope, is a great,
Christmas
beautiful and dystopian listen. A good Christmas gift for the audiophiles in your life. What else can I hustle? We've
You
got
can listen to
stickers. We got koozies.
You can listen to the
We got
final
shirts.
track.
Let's do this. Yeah.
Sharon Van Etten track, the
Yes,
closing
of course.
track, Let Go, is now available and will be coming out on 7-inch vinyl through Mondo as well soon.
And isn't that song that you guys wrote together? Isn't that now in her top like 5
Yeah.
songs on
Oh, it's
Spotify?
jamming.
It's in the top 5 songs in the worldwide, above
Worldwide.
the Beatles.
In the world.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. The more you listen to it, you'll forget that other music exists. You won't even realize that like
weird.
the Rolling Stones or the Monkees were ever a thing. You'll just keep hearing that song over and over again.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Anyway, well, thank you very much.
Anyway, it's getting a little punchy, but thank you, Katie. And
All right. Thanks everybody for joining me.